Hi, welcome to Crime Clueless. We're your hosts. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Lara.
I'm Krista.
And I'm Kayla.
How's everybody doing today?
Good. How are you?
So good. I'm excited to do this case that we're going to do.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
Yeah.
It's very different from anyone that we've done so far.
Ooh,
I like those.
exciting.
Yeah. It takes place 100 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we are related.
Yeah.
I almost said it as well, but
If you didn't know already, we're related.
Yeah, we might sometimes have the same response. Not always, but sometimes. Yeah.
Often, though. Did you?
You both just said often at the same time at the same pitch
I didn't even hear you.
because it was so spot on.
In sync.
Oh, yes.
We're killing it, guys.
Right. Should we dive right in?
Let's do it.
All right. New York City, 1924. The streets were alive with jazz and jitters. The stock market was booming. Speakeasies were overflowing. And bobbed hair was more than a fashion statement. It was a declaration. Flappers twirled through smoky dance halls. Wall Street tycoons clinked highballs in Midtown. And the city, drenched in neon and ambition, pulsed with the electric hum of reinvention. But under that glittering skyline, just a subway ride away from Fifth Avenue, Brooklyn told a different story. Tenement apartments bulged with too many people and too little income. Factory workers lined up for jobs that paid barely enough to survive. Everything was getting louder, faster, and more expensive. If you couldn't keep up, you didn't just fall behind, you disappeared. This was a city of contrasts where one wrong turn could land you in the headlines or in handcuffs. Opportunity was everywhere, so was desperation. And sooner or later, the line between the two was bound to blur. On the dark winter evening of January 5th, 1924, a woman nervously stepped into a Brooklyn grocery store, a Ralston's Market in Park Slope, while a man waited just outside. The young woman cut a stylish figure in a gorgeous sealskin fur coat, an expensive item that most really couldn't afford. She had a chic bobbed haircut tucked under her hat. Approaching the counter, she casually asked the clerks for a dozen eggs. As one clerk turned to pack the eggs for her, the man suddenly strode in behind her, gun in hand. In a flash, the woman whipped out her own small automatic pistol from her coat pocket, training it on the startled clerk. "Stick 'em up, quick," she barked, voice steady, mimicking the snappy line from the pulp novels that she loved. The astonished man's arm shot up. Like one of those toy monkeys on a stick, she later mused. She was half amused even in the moment. The man then jumped into action, brandishing two guns and coolly emptying the cash register while the petite woman held the 6 male employees at gunpoint. The duo dashed out to their getaway car and disappeared into the night with over $600 in loot. Guess how much that is in today's dollars?
We all know how bad I am at guessing.
20,000.
Little
30,000.
Oh.
10,000.
Yeah, it was 11,000
Oh,
in today's dollars.
I almost said 11,000.
Oh, I bet.
Sure.
Spot on.
Blew it.
I blew it.
Come on, Laura.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to be right.
Sure. You hate being right.
I know.
She's not
Next time I'm going to guess correctly.
Mhm. Okay, we'll see.
Do the math and then keep that in your head. Well,
Okay. Perfect.
not a shot had been fired and no one was hurt. New York had never seen anything quite like this. The idea of a young woman as an armed hold-up artist was sensational. The very next day, the Brooklyn Eagle newspaper blared the headlines with the incredulous title, "Woman with a Gun." Witnesses described the stick-up culprits as a slim girl with a stylish bob haircut and a swanky coat. Certainly not the usual gangster profile. The press, especially the tabloids, fell into a frenzy over the story, dubbing her the Bobbed-Haired Bandit. In an era where women criminals were usually seen only as accomplices, here was a pistol-packing flapper apparently leading her tall male companion in crime. It was the perfect jazz age thriller, a gun-toting modern girl defying conventions and the law. As one historian notes, she stole newspaper headlines because she was a woman with a gun driving a fast car, and that was exciting. That was titillating for the public. It was only a week later, and the eggs from the last job had long since been eaten. The money already gone, swallowed whole by rent, a down payment on furniture she could never otherwise afford, and a moment of celebration that they tried to stretch into hope, but hope does not pay the bills. So there they were again. Same coat, same nerves, same borrowed pistol that rattled slightly when her hand trembled. This time at an A&P store on Ralph Avenue in Brooklyn, a narrow grocery with a single humming light above the counter and two sleepy clerks chatting about baseball. Nothing fancy, just enough money to keep the gas bill from getting shut off. She walked in first, cool as peppermint, that fur coat brushing along the dusty shelf of canned beans as she made her way to the counter. One clerk looked up, distracted by the scent of her perfume. A cheap bottle, but worn with pride. He asked her if she needed help. Just some change, she said, slipping a nickel on the counter for the trolley. Behind her, the door jingled. He walked in. No conversation this time, no hesitation. He had two guns drawn, one in each hand, and a voice like rested still. Nobody move. The clerks froze mid-step. She was already reaching into her coat pocket. Out came her pistol, a .25 caliber, small, dark, and surprisingly steady in her palm. She trained it on the older man, eyes narrow, tone sharp. You, open the drawer, now. It was open in less than 60 seconds. He cleared the till. She kept the clerks pinned like mannequins under museum glass, a paper bag stuffed with about $113. Enough to stretch a little longer. Maybe buy that dinette set she saw in the window last week. Maybe cover a doctor's bill. As they stepped back into the night, the door jingled once more, and the city kept breathing around them, unaware that it had just been held up yet again by the bobbed-haired bandit and her wiry accomplice, with a borrowed Buick parked 2 blocks over. They didn't look back. They never did.
Laura, how much is that in money today?
8,000.
No.
No.
I wasn't actually listening. I'm sorry.
Good job.
That's so funny.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I was eating my M&M.
Can't multitask. What are we talking about?
I was going to say, I'm a little upset with myself because Jenna said 100 years ago, and I was like, oh, the 1800s. I was like, oh, yeah, duh.
Love that. It was a Tuesday night on Flatbush Avenue, and the Bohack's grocery store was running on autopilot. The store was nearly empty, except for a few women in worn coats buying bread and sugar, and 2 clerks behind the counter discussing how the Dodgers were going to blow it again this year. Outside, the January air hit like bad whiskey. A woman stood across the street, tucked into a doorway, watching. She wasn't dressed for trouble, at least not the kind you'd expect. Just a woman in a snug fur coat, gloves buttoned tight at the wrist, and her hat tilted just so. She could have been heading to the pictures, except for the still weight in her pocket. She didn't move until the final customer left. The bell above the door gave a soft jingle as she stepped inside, heels clicking on the linoleum. One of the clerks glanced up. She was pretty. Young, the kind of woman they never saw in here unless she was rushing home with milk. She approached the counter slowly, casually. "Can I get milk?" she asked, voice low and steady. The clerk turned to grab it, and that's when the door jingled again. He came in, quiet but fast. One clerk turned and froze. Another stepped back and cursed under his breath. There were 2 guns now, one in each of his hands. The girl had hers out too. No more playing nice. Don't move, she said. Don't scream. Nobody gets hurt if you do exactly what I say. The way she said it, like it was rehearsed, like she meant it. They had a system. He covered the back, eyes darting between the clerks. She handled the till, her little pistol held low and steady. When the door opened, she reached in, not fumbling, just quick, precise. She stuffed the bills into her small cloth purse, mostly singles and fives, a handful of silver coins. On the floor, she snapped, as one of the clerks looked like he might try something. Face down. He did as told. And then they were gone, in and out, in maybe 90 seconds. They didn't take anyone's wallet. They didn't touch a single loaf of bread, just the cash, just what they came in for. Later, the papers would say it was like something out of a movie. A girl with a gun, bobbed hair poking from beneath her hat, and nerves like piano wire. Nobody had seen anything like it. A woman taking the lead, armed, calm, and gone before the cops even got the phone call. And for the third time that month, the same question echoed across Brooklyn. Who was she? Over the next couple months, the bobbed-haired bandit struck almost a dozen times across Brooklyn.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is just like her name and not with the guy too. Is it the same guy each time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I think he's more,
Like a background.
yes, but also not as sensational
Yeah.
for the headlines.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of blends into the background.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like you said, they weren't expecting it to be a woman.
Right. And they'll even try to deny that it's a woman later on because they can't. They can't
Fathom that.
yes. And how they haven't caught her.
Mm-hmm.
What's that Instagram trend? Women in male fields.
Yes.
So she was the first.
Yes.
I'm sure there were others before her,
Yeah.
but you know. The bobbed-haired bandit mainly targeted small working class establishments open in the evening. Grocery stores, drugstores, restaurants, markets, and sometimes even chain stores like Bohack's or A&P Groceries. They had developed a reliable MO. The woman, usually clad in her sealskin fur coat over a fashionable beaded dress, would enter first, create a distraction, asking for some item or for change. Then her accomplice would appear armed with 2 pistols to intimidate from the rear, while the woman coolly produced her own gun and took charge. Victims later said the short, bobbed-haired girl was remarkably calm and confident as she leveled her baby automatic, her .25 caliber. Stick 'em up became her catchphrase, delivered with almost cinematic flair. The pair would clean out the cash registers, taking only money. They never took any valuables, then flee in a getaway car that, as it turned out, was usually borrowed from her accomplice's auto repair job.
Do we mean actually borrowed or did they steal them?
We mean actually borrowed.
Oh, okay.
Yep, they would take them back.
Like if he was repairing them, they would use it and then.
Yeah, so it's always a different car.
Oh,
Interesting.
smart.
Mm-hmm. Each holdup netted a few $100s, more or less, often $200 to $400, which is the equivalent to several thousand in today's dollars. Crime, it turned out, provided just enough cash to stay afloat, never enough to truly get ahead. After the first lucky haul, most of their robberies were much smaller. Ironically, even as their notoriety grew, the two were learning the hard way that crime didn't pay, or at least not enough. By February 1924, this brazen crime wave had become front-page news on a weekly basis. New Yorkers were mesmerized by the girl bandit. The newspapers gave her many names. They called her the Bobbed-Haired Bandit, the Bobbed Bandit, Gun Girl.
A little less creative there. but-
Original.
Yep. And splashed coverage about this petite pistol-packing woman across their pages. As one review later noted, the Bobbed-Haired Bandit was great copy for months. The press speculated endlessly about her identity, her motives, and what her crime spree meant about society. Was she a drug-crazed jazz baby? A coke-addled flapper? The papers really went all, like, anything they could come up with, and it was always something different. They even wondered if she was Robin Hood, stealing to feed her family. Was she a degenerate product of the slums? A clever cross-dressing criminal? Some officers even floated the theory the bandit might be a man in women's clothing, or just a good girl inexplicably gone bad. Every new robbery fueled the legend. The cultural anxieties of the 1920s were also projected into the bandit's story. Social commentators and readers interpreted the bobbed-haired bandit to suit their own biases. She was held up as alternatively a feminist heroine, striking a blow for liberated women, or a cautionary example of the new immoral flapper run amok.
I'm proud of her.
Mm-hmm.
She's just breaking stereotypes.
Yeah, it's hard not to like her.
An icon.
Yep. The one thing, though, is when she is targeting these small places, that's their money to keep the lights on. That's their livelihood. So there's that weird disconnect there between her and who she's taking from.
Yeah, not that we support crime, just, support strong women.
There you go.
An icon in that way. Not that she's robbing people.
No.
Right.
Well, it is interesting also that they're only taking what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're
But
not.
like you said, they're taking directly from the store owners.
Yeah.
They're going to have to eat that cost.
Yeah, exactly. Some people argued that she was this natural product of poverty and harsh factory life, proof that social reforms were needed. And then others saw her as proof that permissive modern society coddled criminals. Just like we're feeling, many in the public couldn't help but root for this audacious bandit. After all, she hadn't killed anyone, and sometimes her targets were chain stores, which weren't exactly sympathetic victims. To working-class New Yorkers, there was something thrilling about seeing one of their own stick it to the establishment. Plus, they were outfoxing the police and living large for a moment. One Brooklyn columnist, his name was Nunnally Johnson, and later he actually was a famed Hollywood screenwriter, captured this sentiment in a tongue-in-cheek tribute he penned later in the year. He argued that she deserved to be immortalized. What she deserves is a ballad, a glorious painting, or perhaps a statue, preferably in Prospect Park, he wrote. Johnson did acknowledge she was no saint, noting that she used pretty bad language and was not adverse to choking somebody now and then during her holdups. Yet he marveled at her pluck. In his colorful prose, Johnson painted her as the real deal, an outlaw along the lines of Jesse James, but with bobbed hair and crimson lipstick. Rather than settle for a grinding $12 a week launder job or fret that maybe her husband's $30 a week couldn't support them, she strapped her old 25 around her waist, slashed her lips with crimson, powdered her nose, and told the grocery store clerk to get in the back room before she bumped him. She spread fear. She went out and got what she wanted. This sardonic admiration in the press only fueled our bobbed-haired bandit's growing legend as a sort of folk heroine of the working class. For the New York Police Department, the bobbed-haired bandit case quickly turned into a major embarrassment. A petite 20-year-old woman was making the city's finest look like fools, and they were not amused. After just the first couple holdups, the NYPD brass were under heavy pressure to get results. Just by mid-January 1924, so after 2 or 3 robberies, Police Commissioner Richard Ingright had 150 plus officers working the case full-time.
Oh, wow.
Detectives interviewed victims. They tried to trace the getaway cars, and they rounded up any suspicious characters, but kept coming up empty. The city's mayor, John F. Hylan, was so flustered by the media hype that he publicly denied the bandit even existed, insisting the bobbed-haired bandit was a fiction of overactive newspapers and that no one woman would be causing all of this chaos.
Oh, jeez.
Such dismissals rang hollow as the heist continued.
Yeah, sounds a little bit like the 1920s.
The pressure was mounting. City Hall was red in the face, and the headlines continued to scream. Grocery clerks were quitting mid-shift, and the police, they were unraveling faster than a discount dress hem in a rainstorm. The word was out, catch the girl with the bob. So that's exactly what the police tried to do. Over and over again. Bobbed hair had gone from a fashion statement to a red flag, and any woman daring enough to cut her hair short and walk alone at night, suspect. This first time, it was a salesgirl working late in a Brooklyn department store. Her shift ended at 9. She stepped out onto Flatbush Avenue in her modest blue coat, her week's wages tucked into her purse, and started her familiar walk home. She never made it to the corner. A patrolman spotted her, slowed, turned, then 2 more officers joined him, and suddenly she was surrounded. Miss, can we ask you a few questions? 5 minutes later, she was in the back of a squad car, bewildered and silent, her hands shaking as they searched her purse. No gun, no note, no loot, just a receipt from Woolsworth and a tin of face powder. But she had bobbed hair. And in 1924, that was apparently enough to ruin your evening. They booked her right away. They brought in the clerks from the last robbery to look at her through a one-way glass. The men shook their heads confused. That's not her, one whispered. She's too tall, another one said. And her eyes are the wrong color. Still, she was held for hours, grilled by detectives who were visibly exhausted and increasingly irritable. Where were you 2 nights ago? I was at home. Can anyone vouch for that? My mother. That answer earned her an eye roll and another round of questioning. Finally, they let her go just before dawn. No apology, just a tired, you're free to go. She left the station with mascara smudged and fury boiling behind her eyes. By morning, though, the paper had already moved on to the next lead, and in the neighborhoods across Brooklyn, the women were watching, they were talking, they were rolling their eyes, and maybe walking with their hats pulled a little lower. Meanwhile, the real bandit, still robbing stores, and having heard about this wrong arrest, was going to start leaving some notes. Somewhere, reading this first headline, I'm guessing with a smirk, she was wondering, how long would it take the city's finest to realize you can't arrest a haircut? Next up, officers got a tip about a young woman with a bobbed haircut and a suspicious attitude. They pounced. Her name was Helen Quigley. She was a 23-year-old actress with stage credits, a sharp jawline, and, unfortunately for her, an affinity for dramatic hats. They hauled her in, and by morning the papers were breathlessly declaring victory. Bandit girl nabbed. Never mind that Helen didn't own a gun or a fur coat or have any way to get a getaway car. Never mind that she looked like she robbed hearts more than grocery stores. The NYPD was too busy patting itself on the back to notice they just arrested someone whose biggest crime was maybe overreacting. And then came a note left behind at the scene of the very next robbery. During an early February robbery of a drugstore in Clinton Hill, the stick-up itself was flawless, quick, clean, and quiet. They'd hit a Ralston's grocery in the middle of a slow evening, just 2 clerks and a stock boy rearranging soup cans, barely any customers, not even a baseball bat under the counter. She entered first, as always. Just looking for eggs, she said. But I don't think she meant the kind that came in a carton. Her partner followed, seconds later, pistol first. Hands up, she said. We're not here to ruin your day. We just want your drawer. The clerks obeyed. The cash was handed over with minimal protest, and she was given just under $100. A good night, not a great one. But that wasn't the point, because this time she didn't come empty-handed. She left something behind, a handwritten note that she'd written in lipstick, folded in half, placed neatly next to the register like it belonged there. And here's what it said. To the fish peddling bums in blue. You got the wrong girl. Let her go. She's not me. I'm me. And I'm still out here. Best of luck catching up. Though you boys seem more useful dancing at your banquets than solving crimes.
Oh no.
Yours as always, the bobbed-haired bandit and companion. Then, in a postscript, and for the record, her hats are nicer than mine.
Her poor companion. That's
Yeah,
what I
right.
keep thinking. It's like just
She's
there.
like, what do you mean you're leaving a note?
Yeah.
The star of the show and other.
Yep. Yep.
That's how it feels.
Yeah. The Bobbed-Haired
like, "I'll-"
Bandit and companion.
Companion. Not to mention the guy who gets the getaway car and
Mhm.
comes in with the extra muscle.
She's the star.
Yeah,
She is.
she is.
She's enjoying her moment.
She is. By the time the police arrived, the robbers were long gone, and so was the last shred of the police's dignity. The letter made the papers the next day. The NYPD did not find it funny. The public did, though.
Mhm.
And for a few glorious days, it seemed like every flapper with a sense of humor was Team Bandit. The room went quiet when everyone at the NYPD read the note. Not a lot of ways to spin this one. They had the wrong woman in jail. The real one, still out there, still armed, still stylish.
Killing it.
Yeah, so good, right?
So funny to me that the public like loves her and she's robbing all the businesses.
Mm-hmm.
They're all cheering for her and excited about her, but
It might be
Yeah.
more of a testament to how much they don't like the police.
maybe
Maybe.
you feel bad for these small businesses, like you
Yeah.
said. And if she is taking all their money for the day, if she's robbing them at night,
Yeah,
that's sad.
it is.
But it's kind of funny that the public is just cheering her on.
Mhm.
Keep going.
I mean, she hasn't hurt anyone
Yeah.
physically, so I think there is that behind it. And then,
They're like, oh, she's just robbing him. It's fine.
yeah,
No big deal.
I
No,
think they
no.
prefer when she robs a big corporate
Yeah,
chain
the
place.
chains.
Mm-hmm.
It's also just a story to them because they're not probably being affected
Yeah.
personally. I'm sure that the store owners aren't cheering for her, but
No,
Yeah.
They're all probably worried
yes.
every time a girl with a bob walks in.
right?
Run.
Like,
Like,
call the police.
grow faster, hair.
Yeah.
I'm just still hung up on the seal fur coat.
Did you look it up?
No, but that's so sad.
I know.
A seal.
Probably very waterproof, right?
I mean, I would assume so.
It is cold in New York in February and January.
No, seals are so cute.
I know. I didn't know that they were made for coats back then.
I didn't either.
The NYPD did release Helen Quigley within a few hours. No apology, of course, just muttered it was a misunderstanding. The real bandit had spoken, not in court, not in confession, but in pure dripping sarcasm, signed with panache. She didn't just rob stores, she had robbed the NYPD of their pride, one headline at a time. This kind of public ridicule was extraordinary. A bandit openly baiting the police and the press, and it only intensified the pressure on law enforcement. The bandit's letters soon became a hallmark of her crime spree. In fact, at almost every crime after that, she would drop another jeering note for the frustrated detectives. One such note threatened, "I'll kill you off one by one if you start out after me. So long, boys. Don't forget, you will hear from me during the week." Another message announced that the bandit had been on a brief holiday. It said, "I regret that I have not had the opportunity of giving you anything to do the last few days. I have been taking a little vacation. However, I am now back on the job and you will hear from me regularly. I hear the police have orders to shoot and kill me on sight. That's all right, but the police will not be the only ones to shoot." Yeah. She's getting brazen.
Yeah.
Her taunts made the authorities lose face in front of the public. The newspapers gleefully printed the bandit's quoted insults, effectively turning the chase into a cat and mouse spectacle. Some newspapers even used the story to lampoon the NYPD and city officials for their powerlessness in taming crime in the 1920s in New York. The Daily News ran cartoons and sarcastic pieces about the bandit always being one step ahead. The NYPD's pride was on the line and morale was suffering. The New York police responded by doubling down. Commissioner Enright flooded Brooklyn with extra patrolmen and even volunteer officers from other divisions. Roadblocks were set up on bridges and thoroughfares, and the shoot to kill order was actually issued. Any officer who encountered the bandits was authorized to use deadly force on sight. The police began stopping any young woman with bobbed hair who even vaguely resembled the descriptions. One famous example, author F. Scott Fitzgerald, later claimed that his own wife, Zelda Fitzgerald, the epitome of a 1920s bobbed-haired flapper, was stopped by police on the Queensboro Bridge one night on suspicion of being the bobbed-haired bandit. Zelda, of course, was innocent, but this incident shows just how frantic and far-reaching the manhunt had become. In their desperation, police even resorted to discriminatory roundups. By some reports, they detained several people they thought were cross-dressing men, unable to believe a quote-unquote real woman could be the culprit. Despite all of this effort, through February and into March 1924, the bandit continued to slip through their fingers, pulling heist after heist. The city was riveted by the saga. Crowds would gather outside crime scenes, and newspapers hawked extra editions whenever a new robbery or lead was reported.
Do you know how many robberies have happened up to this point?
I can tell you exactly.
Awesome.
We had the first on January 5th, 1924. Then we have January 12th, January 15th, January 20th, January 22nd. So 5 in January. And then we have February 3rd. And then her break was until February 23rd. And then 3 in March. And then we'll have 1 in April.
Oh my gosh.
11 total.
A lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
Yeah.
And they're close together, too.
Mm-hmm.
In one almost comic episode, the bobbed-haired bandit pulled off a drugstore holdup while a policeman's ball was happening right across the street.
Oh, gosh.
That was just, I think on her part, that had to have been just like a big
Taunt.
screw you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do this right across the street from you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. As the city's finest danced and socialized at their gala, the bobbed-haired bandit waltzed into the shop, robbed it, and got away clean before the music next door even stopped. Incidents like this made the police department even more of a laughingstock. By early spring, the stakes were getting higher, and so was the risk of violence. On March 12, 1924, during a stick-up at a Brooklyn drugstore, an impatient customer tried to interfere and grab her gun. Her accomplice reacted instinctively, firing off a shot that wounded the man, thankfully not fatally. This was the first time someone had been injured in the bobbed-haired bandit's crime spree, and it marked a turning point. The newspapers seized on the shooting as a sign that the mysterious bandit was growing desperate and dangerous. It was only a matter of time before someone died, the New York Times grimly noted after the incident. The public's Robin Hood romanticism gave way to sharper fear. The bandit was now armed and would shoot, it seemed, rather than be caught. By April, the bobbed-haired bandit had shown no signs of slowing down. Flushed with bravado and feeling the heat from the massive manhunt, she decided it was time for one last big job, a robbery that, if successful, could set them up with enough cash to disappear and start fresh elsewhere. They set their sights on an especially tempting target, the local payroll office of the National Biscuit Company, which is Nabisco, located on Pacific Street in Brooklyn. As it happened, this Nabisco warehouse was practically in her backyard.
Sorry, Krista and I had the same realization at the same time that Nabisco stands for National Biscuit Company. I was like, whoa. And then I watched Krista's eyes like, oh,
What?
So funny.
Nabisco.
Yeah.
Yes.
Before I had seen this case, I didn't know that either.
Oh, I never didn't know.
I never thought about it.
No.
I just thought it was so funny. So I had my own realization. I see Krista.
I was like sounding it out in my head. Like,
Totally.
Wait a second.
Oh,
I didn't have that realization.
and now we just told her and anyone else that didn't at the moment.
Learning all kinds of things today.
Yep. That's my goal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So this Nabisco warehouse, like I said, is practically in their backyard. It lined up to the property of our companion's mother's home. So the couple had insider knowledge. They had noticed that every week the company payroll cash, thousands of dollars, was laid out on a desk at a certain time. They'd glimpsed it through the back windows during morning coffee visits to his mom's house. They formulated an elaborate plan for the heist. They would disguise themselves as out-of-towners. They would hire a chauffeur with a fancy Packard car to drive them to Nabisco offices so as not to arouse suspicion. In preparation, our bobbed-haired bandit donned a disguise. She pinned blonde curls under her hat to alter her appearance from her usual dark bob. On the appointed day, April 1st, 1924, their scheme launched. The unsuspecting chauffeur delivered the well-dressed young couple to Nabisco's payroll office, where they drew their guns and announced the stick-up. They tied up the horrified chauffeur with picture frame wire, leaving him in the back seat of the car as they went in to get the loot. Inside the busy payroll room, however, things immediately went awry. To their surprise, they didn't find the expected stacks of cash on the manager's desk. At the last minute, someone had locked the money in a safe. As our bandit guarded the room full of clerks and workers, our companion frantically searched for the cash to no avail. Amid the confusion, one brave employee made a lunge for the bandit, trying to knock the pistol from her hand. She stumbled back and fell over a chair, letting out a cry. Thinking she had been hurt, our companion panicked. He fired his gun twice, hitting the payroll cashier in the shoulder. The man collapsed wounded, but he did survive. While the rest of the employees cowered, for a split second, they realized that they were now facing the one scenario they had desperately avoided: armed robbery with a bloodied victim on the floor. The couple exchanged a look. This was the end of the line. With police likely on the way in minutes, they bolted. They fled in a panic, leaving behind $8,000, which, what do you think that is in today's dollars?
Laura, you're up.
Nope. 8,000. It's 150,000.
Well, I was going to guess way off. So.
Oh,
A lot.
yeah. They left it sitting in the open safe that they had managed to get open. It was just moments too late. The money was left untouched in their hurry. Rushing outside, they jumped back into the car and sped off. They abandoned the fancy car a few blocks away by a railroad depot, leaving the poor chauffeur still tied up in the back seat, unharmed but very confused. The Nabisco warehouse shootout was front page news by the next morning. Now, the bobbed-haired bandit had shot someone, confirming everyone's fears about her escalating desperation.
Is this the second person they've shot?
Yeah, the one that was like the customer that tried to
Right.
interfere. Yeah. The Times declared that the bandit had become desperate, and detectives swarmed the neighborhood. Finally, for the first time really, turning up some solid leads. A warehouse worker recognized Ed Cooney's face during the robbery. He knew him from the neighborhood. And with this identification, police at last put a real name and identity to their phantom bandits. By April 15th, the NYPD announced they had strong evidence that the culprits were Ed and Celia Cooney of Brooklyn.
They really shouldn't have tried to rob a place right by their mother-in-law. I feel like that's more risky, that more people would know who you are.
Yeah.
Which
I've
was
seen
fair.
that too. Like, why would you rob somewhere where you hang out all the time?
Yeah,
Well,
without a mask or something, you know.
Yeah.
yeah, but like Jenna said, they were looking at it potentially as an opportunity to start fresh. So maybe getting a quick getaway into the mother's house, take off the disguises and leave and move somewhere else. Like
Maybe,
that makes it
yeah.
a lot easier if you are planning on getting
Leaving.
away.
And they were.
Yeah.
They do go to Florida 2 days later.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So, who is this bobbed-haired bandit? Celia Roth Cooney entered the world in poverty. Born in 1904 to a large, struggling family, she literally started life in a basement apartment in New York. One of 9 children with an alcoholic father, Celia and her siblings were neglected and even sent out to beg on the streets until relatives took them in. By 16, Celia struck out on her own, working long days as a laundress from 1919, so she would have only been 15, onward. Though uneducated, she was industrious. She was a good worker, always prompt, her old boss recalled, adding that learning she became the notorious bandit was, some surprise, a knockout. In the early 1920s, New York City was land of contrasts. We have the jazz age in full swing. We had widening class gaps and high crime rates. Celia was a product of this era, a modern young woman in style, but stuck in old-fashioned economic hardship. In Brooklyn's Bedford district, today Bedford-Stuyvesant, she lived with her sweetheart, Edward Ed Cooney, in a tiny furnished room. Celia was barely 5 feet tall. Ed was a lanky auto mechanic/welder, and they married in May 1923. She was 20, he was 25. Despite their love, money was perpetually tight. Ed earned about $30 a week, which is the equivalent of $30,000 a year today. And Celia could only make about $12 weekly doing menial jobs. By late 1923, newlywed Celia had become pregnant. And with a baby on the way, the couple's financial anxiety soared. Celia dreamed of having nice things, a real home with new furniture, the kind she saw in the movies, magazines, and shop windows. But on their income, that dream was utterly out of reach.
So she was pregnant the whole time that they were
Mhm.
robbing.
Yeah.
Gotta provide for your family.
Yep. It was that desperation that pushed the young couple into the decision. If honest work wouldn't pay enough, they would turn to crime. As Celia later explained, she didn't see herself as some feminist outlaw, not a female bandit queen. She was a mom-to-be who wanted money to buy a bedroom set and a dinette for her family. In other words, Celia envisioned herself as a traditional wife and mother, but one who felt forced by circumstances to steal for a better life. Neither of them had a criminal record, but in late 1923, the Cooneys quietly borrowed a car from Ed's auto shop, acquired a couple of cheap pistols, and began plotting their robberies. Little did they know at the time, this scheme would make Celia one of the most infamous figures of jazz-age New York, a headline-grabbing outlaw who would baffle police, captivate the public, and earn that enduring nickname, the Bobbed-Haired Bandit.
It's going straight to armed robbery.
Mm-hmm.
Makes
Do what
me
you gotta
so
do.
sad
Yeah.
though. Like all she wanted was to buy things for her new baby.
Yeah.
That's so
That is
sad. That
She-
the only way they could do that, that they thought of is to rob
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
Really sad.
I know it's hard to know how to even feel, you know,
Yeah.
it's really sad.
It's like heartbreaking because they're both working. I mean, he's doing his job. She's trying to get some money.
They're working
And they still
long
can't
days.
get by.
Yep. They can't even pay their rent.
Yeah. You said he's making in today's money $30,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. And you're
Hard.
living
Mhm.
in New York, outside of New York.
Yeah.
That's even more difficult.
Yeah. So combined, they were only making like 45,000 equivalent to today.
Yeah.
Mhm. You're right. After their very first robbery, remember that dozen eggs? They were emboldened by their success and flush with cash. The two did waste no time treating themselves. With that first haul, which remember is about 11,000, so like a third of what they would make in a whole year.
Yeah.
They upgraded their living situation. They immediately rented a 2-story frame house at 1099 Pacific Street in Brooklyn, and they filled it with pricey new furniture. Celia even splurged on a feast of porterhouse steak to celebrate their daring coup. For a brief moment, the young couple lived the comfortable life they dreamed of, using that money to feather their nest for their coming baby. But unfortunately, the money didn't last long. Fine furniture, the better apartment meant more bills to pay, and they quickly burned through what they had stolen. They found themselves back to scraping by, only now with the taste of this good life and really no legitimate way to sustain it. The solution had seemed so obvious. If reckless, they would rob again. And that's what spurred Celia and Ed onto their months-long crime spree. When investigators checked the couple's Pacific Street house, now we're back in April, they found it vacated. The Cooneys had vanished, but they also learned that Celia was heavily pregnant, her baby due imminently. The police commissioner promptly alerted every hospital and maternity clinic in the area to watch for any pregnant young woman from Brooklyn fitting Celia's description.
How was that not something that someone said when they were describing her.
I'm wondering if the fur coat helped.
Maybe she was just covering it.
Yeah.
Could be. Maybe that's why she wore the coat.
Maybe.
The coat and the loose beaded dress maybe hid it enough.
Maybe.
If it was her first pregnancy too, it might have been not as noticeable. I don't know.
Maybe.
And it was. Yeah.
And she's, I don't know. Guess depends on how she was carrying the baby.
Yeah.
She's
'Cause she's
short.
short. She's barely 5 feet. Yeah.
I know that
Same.
a long time ago, I saw that women used to use binders so that they could hide their pregnancy long enough to stay employed because you would get let go or fired if they
Mm.
found out you were pregnant.
Could be.
So she
Maybe
could have
that
been using
too.
binding
Yeah.
it a little bit, and the loose dress and the coat probably wasn't as easy to see,
Yeah.
Probably.
especially when you have a gun in your face.
I guess.
honestly.
Yeah, might not have been
true.
paying attention to
Yes,
that.
Yes.
She was, in and out in 90 seconds on some
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
so,
Some of them were fast.
yeah.
But I know you said she was usually the first one in to make a comment.
Yeah.
I'm just looking
Mhm.
for this.
It's interesting that nobody.
Noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
Just
said she was
would.
due like any day.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
how did we miss? She's 9 months pregnant.
Yeah.
That's the thing, too. She didn't just get pregnant. She's actually due in April.
Oh, wow.
So NYPD put that out to all the hospitals in the area. However, the Coonies were already far away. Authorities didn't know, but Celia and Ed had quietly slipped out of New York immediately after the botched Nabisco heist. They knew Brooklyn had become far too hot for them. Between the widely printed descriptions of their face and they knew Ed had been recognized, their days of anonymity were over. So, in the first week of April 1924, the couple took their remaining savings and booked passage heading south. They left New York by boat, headed for Jacksonville, Florida, under aliases, hoping to start fresh in a place where no one knew them. On the voyage down the eastern seaboard, Celia was extremely seasick, not helped by her pregnancy, and both were anxious wrecks. They arrived in Jacksonville, seasick and afraid, as their biographers later wrote. But at least in Florida, they believed they had shaken off the massive dragnet centered on New York. They had no intention of committing more crimes down south. The plan was to lie low and begin new lives as fugitives. In mid-April 1924, the Coonies had holed up in a cheap boarding house in Jacksonville. They had almost no money, and they were nervously awaiting the birth of their child.
Sounds like they're in a worse situation for what they did.
Yeah.
If they had just kept working, they had family there.
Mhm.
Now they're wanted people who have no money
Right.
running away
so
to a different
sad.
state.
Yep.
By mid-April, Celia gave birth to a baby girl whom they named Catherine. But in a cruel twist of fate, the newborn was ill and died just a few days later.
Ugh, that's so sad.
Awful.
It's
I know.
sad.
Everything they did was for her,
Mhm.
and that's terrible.
The loss was devastating for the young parents. Ed was heartbroken and he had been desperate to give his little girl a proper burial. In that vulnerable moment, he made a fateful mistake. Ed sent a telegraph to his mother back in Brooklyn, asking her to wire him money for the baby's burial expenses. The message was short and didn't explicitly confess anything, but by this point, the NYPD had been closely watching all of the two's relatives. Detectives either intercepted the telegram or were tipped off by Ed's mother about his location. Accounts vary. Some say they got clues from the Jacksonville undertaker. Either way, the authorities now knew the fugitives were in Jacksonville, Florida. Just past midnight on April 21st, 1924, a team of New York detectives who had raced down to Florida by train surrounded their Jacksonville boarding house. They burst in with guns drawn and found the couple weak and grieving. Their infant daughter's death had only been a couple days before. Either cornered or heartbroken, Celia kept her trademark nerve. Facing the armed detectives, the 20-year-old raised her hands and allegedly quipped, "I won't shoot if you won't." She diffused the tension with dark humor. In another version of the story, Celia stepped forward and coolly announced, "I am the bobbed-haired bandit you've been looking for." Either way, she and Ed surrendered without a fight. Ed actually wanted to go out in a dramatic fashion, according to Celia later. He had considered a murder-suicide pact to shoot her and himself rather than be captured. But Celia refused that ending. "We couldn't quit that way," she told him. And so the chase was over. After just over 4 months, the bobbed-haired bandit's life of crime ended on that April night in Florida. News of their capture in Florida hit New York like a thunderclap. The city that had followed every twist of the saga now went into a frenzy. The bobbed-haired bandit was front-page news coast to coast. When Celia and Ed, now infamous, were brought back to New York by train at the end of April 1924, an enormous crowd swarmed Penn Station to catch a glimpse of them. Thousands of curious onlookers packed the station platforms, craning for a view of the petite bandit as detectives led her in handcuffs. Their arrival drew a bigger and far more enthusiastic crowd, it was noted, than the send-off for President Calvin Coolidge at the very same station earlier that day.
Oh, wow.
Embarrassing.
The scene was pandemonium. Celia, visibly amused, hid her face behind a magazine and grinned impishly as photographers' flashbulbs popped. The New York Times, in a somewhat catty tone, described her at the station as a pert, self-sufficient, appearing little person with plenty of nerve who seems to consider herself the heroine of a melodrama.
She kind of is. They made her that way.
Yeah,
They did.
They did.
You need to go back to those kinds of headlines.
Yes.
Her husband, Ed, the Times added dismissively, is slower-witted and somewhat ungainly.
It's like they're now backtracking now that they're caught.
Mm-hmm. The paper took pains to note that Celia's famous hair was naturally dark, not blonde. Those curls had been a disguise, as if debunking one last aspect of her legend. Public opinion was split. Some papers emphasized Celia as a tragic young mother arriving in New York in mourning black after the loss of her baby. Sympathetic stories highlighted her youth and her grief, portraying her as more to be pitied than scorned. Other media outlets focused on her still saucy demeanor, painting her as an unrepentant thrill seeker, basking in her notoriety. The Times fell in the latter camp, sniffing that she seems to consider herself the heroine, and that neither Celia nor Ed were especially attractive people.
What a dig.
What a dig. In truth, Celia likely was of two minds, devastated by her baby's death and worried for her future, yet also maybe a little bit proud of how she had handled herself. Even under arrest, the bandit kept up a brave front and flashes of humor. In the weeks that followed, they were the center of a sensational legal spectacle. The tabloids nicknamed the legal proceedings the Bobbed-Haired Bandit trial, original, though in reality, it never reached a dramatic jury trial. The evidence against them was overwhelming. They had dozens of robbery victims that could identify them, and Ed's mother's testimony linked them to the Nabisco attempt. Celia herself decided to confess fully. In negotiated pleas, Celia and Ed both pleaded guilty to multiple counts of armed robbery. Their courtroom appearances were standing room only events. Ordinary people lined up for hours hoping to see the criminal celebrity couple in person. When the judge asked why she had done it, Celia broke down in tears. In a trembling voice, she delivered a statement that would be quoted in every paper. She said she didn't want her baby to be born in squalor, and that desperate poverty had driven them to crime. This plea did evoke some sympathy. It was the plain truth of her motive, but it did not sway sentencing. The judge, under intense public scrutiny, showed little leniency. In June 1924, Celia and Ed each received, guess how long they each got for prison time?
10 years.
25.
Pretty good. 10 to 20 years in
Hey.
state prison.
Good job, ladies.
Yep.
Thank you.
Which was at the time the maximum penalty for their crime spree. Crime doesn't pay, the paper said, echoing the judge's lecture as the once glamorous bandit was led away in her prison dress. The aftermath of the case held few surprises. For one, the celebrity of the Bobbed-Haired Bandit didn't immediately fade. While incarcerated, Celia was approached by media baron William Randolph Hearst, who offered to pay for her tell-all memoir to serialize in his newspapers. They reportedly paid Celia $1,000, which was a lot of money at the time, for the rights to her story. Beginning in May 1924, just right after their trial and sentencing, articles ran under titles like The Bobbed-Haired Bandit's Own Story in papers across the country. The American, which was the name of the newspaper, advertised it as the strangest, weirdest, most dramatic, most tragic human story ever told.
The most everything.
The most everything.
A much more creative, headline than the other one.
Mhm. Of course, these memoir pieces were likely polished by ghostwriters and editors. They presented Celia's version of events, emphasizing her poverty, her love for Ed, and her remorse. The "Doesn't Pay, Says Gun Girl" was one of the headlines.
And we're back.
Yeah. The series was wildly popular for a time, but fads passed quickly. By the late 1920s, new scandals and criminals had replaced Celia in the public imagination. Meanwhile, Celia and Ed were off to serve their prison sentences in separate prisons. Celia to Auburn State Prison for Women, and Ed to the notorious Sing Sing Prison up the Hudson. They would end up only serving the minimum, and with good behavior, both were paroled after 7 years in 1931. Those 7 years were not easy. Ed, in particular, endured a harsh fate behind bars. He lost part of his right arm in a prison workshop accident with a license plate printing press. Oh, and he was moved from Sing Sing to Auburn just a couple months later, so they were in the same prison, but they never got to see each other, of course.
Mhm.
He also contracted tuberculosis while incarcerated. He got out and he tried to sue New York for $100,000 for his arm injury, and he was awarded $12,000 in damages, which, again, was a lot of money at the time. When they were released, they briefly had a chance to rebuild. That settlement allowed them to buy a small cottage on Long Island. For a short while, they enjoyed peaceful family life. Celia and Ed had 2 sons after prison, Patrick and Edward, born a few years into their freedom. By all accounts, Celia proved to be a devoted, straight-laced mother. A later report described her in those years as dutiful and selfless, working to support her boys. Neighbors in Long Island or Queens who met the Coonies had no idea the friendly little housewife had once been the Bobbed-Haired Bandit.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Can you imagine after living next door, being best friends, oh my gosh, she's so sweet. And then you go back and read those articles. You're like, oh,
I know. Wouldn't
that's
that
who
be
she
wild?
is. That would be wild.
Did they keep their names? They didn't change their names or anything, did they?
I couldn't find that they did.
Okay.
Yeah. But they did keep what happened under wraps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure. But that's just so funny.
Well, you'll like what's coming up. Not this next part. This next part's very sad. In 1936, so just 5 years after they got out of prison, Ed died from the long-term effects of TB.
Oh.
And he was only 37 years old.
It is sad.
So Celia was widowed at 32 and left to raise 2 young children on her own. And to make matters worse, a fire ravaged their home not long after, destroying all of their belongings.
Oh, no.
Sad.
Celia fell into poverty once more and had to rely on welfare relief at times to keep her boys fed. Through all of these hardships, though, she never returned to crime. She kept her head down and lived, law-abidingly for the rest of her life. She remarried in, I believe, 1943 to a man named Harold, and they raised their children together. Astonishingly, Celia never told her own children about her wild past. The boys grew up entirely unaware that their mother had been the infamous Bobbed-Haired Bandit of legend. She was just mom.
Did her new husband know?
I think so. I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Interesting.
I would think so, right?
I mean, I would hope so.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if none of her neighbors knew, maybe it just never came up. I don't know.
Oh, right. You never asked.
Oh, sorry. Didn't think it was pertinent.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
No longer relevant.
Decades rolled by. By the 1980s, Celia was an elderly grandmother living a quiet, modest life. Eventually, she moved to Florida, and she was living with Alzheimer's, and so she moved in with one of her sons. As her mind faded, the long-suppressed memories of 1924 began to resurface. She would murmur strange things about guns and robberies, leaving her, middle-aged sons bewildered. Only after she passed did her family begin to piece together the truth. Cecilia died on July 13th, 1992, at the age of 88. Her son, Ed Jr., did an extensive family search and discovered his mother's secret identity.
It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
He said he was stunned and found it a terrible, terrible shock. I just never dreamed that any of that had taken place.
That's so crazy.
I feel like at a certain point, once they got to be adults, you'd want to tell them, but maybe she just wanted to leave it all in the past or something.
Probably.
I'm sure they were just shocked.
Yeah.
I did not believe that.
A couple other things. Crime may have run in her family. While Celia was in prison, one of her brothers, named Owen, was shot in 1927 while attempting a jewelry store robbery. She reportedly was distraught at the news behind bars, fearing that she had been a bad influence. All right. So that is the story of the Bobbed-Haired Bandit.
I like
Celia
that
and
one.
Ed.
Mhm.
That was really interesting.
Yeah.
I like that one too. I find it fascinating. And if people like the older ones, or if you guys like the older ones, we can do more of them. I like digging into history.
Yeah.
Kinda
I
like
think
a-
that's an interesting look at, New York in the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde story that maybe
Yes.
people don't know about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Bonnie and Clyde are always kind of popular for people.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. They
And
have
that's-
that name recognition.
Yeah, and that's what this kind of reminded me of.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. I think it just would be so crazy to be middle-aged and then find out that your mom was
right.
robbing stores for, months.
And was infamous too.
Yeah.
Everyone would have known who she was.
and spent a bunch of time in jail.
Yeah.
I know. I wonder if they were able to ever find like the newspaper articles that were written about her.
Oh, I'm sure.
That'd be interesting for them to read.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can now, but in the 90s, I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah. Her son, I think, would have been in his 60s
Hmm.
because he was born in the early 30s.
Yeah.
How old were her kids when Ed died?
Really
They
young.
were still pretty little.
Yeah, because
They
they
didn't have to explain how he got to be, I guess, in prison.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
yeah.
that's true. They got out in 1931 and he passed in 1936. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, only 5 years. So, I mean, they could have been 2 and 4.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Still little.
little.
That was really interesting. I liked that one.
Yeah.
Me too.
Something a little different, but
It's
just as
different.
interesting.
Yes, I agree. And I hope you guys thought so too. Let us know what you think, if you like the old ones or if there's some other one you want us to cover that maybe you've heard of, found interesting. We would love to do that. You can reach out to us either on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. All of those were at Crime Clueless, or you can send us an email, crimeclueless@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love if you take a moment to rate, review, or share our podcast. Your support means the world to us. You can find Crime Clueless on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, iHeart, and all major streaming platforms. Thank you again for listening. We hope you enjoyed that one. And remember, refuse to be clueless, hairless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murders.
Bye.
Bye.